Hello and welcome to the second installment of a quarterly common video series on Web3 by me, James Burnie, a partner at Gunnar Cook. In this installment, we will consider the concept of staking and the regulatory implications of being involved in this activity. The concept of staking has become increasingly popular as a Web3 activity, being a way of earning a passive income on held crypto assets. In broad terms, investors lock up their crypto assets, meaning that they cannot use them, and in return will receive further crypto assets. Superficially, the look and feel of this arrangement draws parallels with a fixed-term bank deposit. However, what is important and different is how this return is generated. So we're going to start by looking at the many types and phases of staking which exist. And in fact, understanding the mechanics of staking is important to understand the risks of it. In much the same way as understanding the mechanics of banking is important to understand the risks of that activity. For example, there is no money in the bank as such, but rather a debt claim. And as such, the core risks around banking are linked to the solvency of the bank. Where staking is more complicated, however, is in that staking covers a variety of very different activities. Firstly, and arguably the original true form of staking, is validator staking. This operates by a proof-of-stake blockchain protocol, and the purpose of this form of staking is to provide an alternative to the original proof-of-work protocols, epitomized by the UTXO protocol underlying the Bitcoin blockchain. The core starting point of this proof-of-work protocol was to increase the amount of energy required in order to hack or game the blockchain, and therefore to make it prohibitive from an energy cost perspective to try and override the blockchain. By comparison, proof-of-work protocols approach this problem a different way. So instead of making it overly energy intensive to try and override the protocol, a proof-of-work protocol requires validators to the protocol to put forward a certain amount of crypto assets in order to be able to participate. In the event that a validator is deemed a bad actor, that person running that will forfeit some of all of the stake. So importantly, there's a key question being looked at here in terms of how the actions of the person in the validation is deemed to have acted, and a simple mistake can lead to a loss of crypto assets. So the risks here are not so much about solvency, but about things like how the protocol operates and whether people are interacting with the protocol make mistakes. Conversely, a very different form of staking is staking in the context of decentralized or DeFi finance. This generally concerns the provision of liquidity. So a common feature of DeFi protocols is taking crypto assets from one participant and then making a return on that crypto asset. For example, a return can be generated by lending crypto assets to different crypto exchanges in order to give them liquidity. The return is then passed back to the participant. As you will see, whilst superficially the results are the same under both forms of staking, in that in both of them there is a return on the locking up of crypto assets, the risks involved are very different. Because whereas with validator staking the focus is on the protocol and on mistakes in running the protocol, with DeFi staking there are risks, for example, in terms of the counterparties to which the crypto assets are lent and the ability to get liquidity in the crypto markets. There are also risks around the smart contracts which underline the strategy used to create the DeFi return. In fact, the fact that this term taking generally refers to a particular type of output without focusing on the mechanism for generating output also means there are other forms outside of staking, outside of the main two types we've just described. In the video game industry, for example, crypto assets may be locked in terms of rewarding players when they take certain actions. So for example, if you lock up a particular character as a crypto asset, it may be that you get power-ups or something like that. These power-ups are determined by the actual game mechanics and are not linked to anything like a protocol. They're not linked to any form of lending. It is simply how the video game rewards people for taking certain in-game actions it wishes to encourage. Lastly, even though it's out of scope of this particular discussion, we would just note that there are some additional forms of staking that build upon the above, so you can combine them. Another thing you can do is you can take, for example, a tokenized version of staking, sometimes referred to as liquid staking, where a token represents the proceeds of staking, and that token itself can be lent on lent. And in this kind of way, you can combine both validated staking, which is the original staking, to create that return, and then use the token which represents the return in a DeFi staking protocol to try and maximize it further. Of course, when you do this, you're combining the risks involved with both activities and then the risks as regards how the two of them will then interact. Given that staking, at least in the sense of both validated and DeFi staking, has characteristics, at least superficially, to a regulated investment, a core question which is being looked at the moment is whether such activity should be regulated, and if so, how it should be regulated. The first starting point here, of course, is looking at regulation as it exists at the moment. And the central question is often whether the activity would fall within the definition of collective investment scheme. Whilst the full definition of collective investment scheme, or more colloquially referred to as a fund, is complex, in very broad terms, a collective investment scheme relates to the activity of managing a pool of assets or property as a whole on behalf of participants who do not have day-to-day control over that property. The definition is therefore broad, and notably it's broader than its European equivalent, the collective investment undertaking. The effect of falling within the definition of collective investment scheme can often be detrimental for products such as staking, simply because the nature of the risk which that regulatory regime was designed to mitigate revolve around things like taking investment management decisions, whereas decision-making in relation to staking in terms of things like validated staking are more about how to best optimize your protocol. So it's less about making a decision as to what to invest into, and more about how to best optimize a piece of code. Given that this is the case, it is not a natural fit between the regulations around collective investment schemes and the sorts of risks which are actually involved in staking. DeFi tech staking in this context raises other issues as well. For example, if it's done on a fully decentralized basis, it may be difficult to define that individual investment manager who is responsible for making the investment decision. And this then throws up different questions as to how to fit the two together. So even if you've got a form of staking which is more akin to a form of investment, that doesn't necessarily mean that the regulatory regime is best adapted for that particular type of activity, given the fact the regulatory regime predates the advent of these forms of activity. Looking into the future, there is clearly going to be a need, therefore, to adapt regulation to properly mitigate the specific risks of staking. And in this respect, the HMT consultation, Future Financial Services Regulatory Regime for Crypto Assets, consultation and call for evidence, is a welcome step in the right direction. Notably, that in addition to a chapter looking at staking itself, the consultation also specifically refers to the broader need to combat the potential for market abuse in staking. And actually across the industry, this has seen a particular importance and actually a better thing to focus on than trying to put it within a collective investment scheme type arrangement. To understand the particular importance of combating market abuse in the context of validated staking, it's worth starting off by looking at what MEV is, because it's become increasingly an important revenue source in the industry. MEV refers to the concept of maximum extractable value. And MEV refers to various practices designed to generate additional revenue for validators. For example, by changing the order of transactions to which the block creator process occurs. Consequences of interplaying with the MEV include the ability to front-run transactions, so that participants can structure transactions knowing which transactions will be next in line in the future, as well as the ability to get paid to reorder transactions in accordance with the instructions of clients. And different approaches towards MEV are therefore seen as more or less akin to traditional market abuse. It is therefore important to consider what protections should be in place in order to protect against such behaviour in the event it's considered toxic or abusive, as a way to encourage better validating staking more generally. Of course, it's very easy to say that there should be sensible policy regulation that addresses the specific risks of staking, but actually doing this is another thing. And in an industry which is geographically mercurial, and which the same words we've just seen can have completely different meanings, the only thing that can be certain in the world of trying to regulate staking is that there's a long, winding road ahead.